Okay, so in the 70s, so you started to put forward the case for children and to some degree as well, simultaneously, the case for fathers, and you received a fair bit of resistance as a consequence of that. And it sounds like the way you're setting up the argument is that the conflict, what was the conflict though? Was it that the women who were being appealed to by now wanted untrammeled freedom of choice for them under all circumstances? Because the reason I'm asking is because if you have children, obviously half the children you have are female, and you'd assume that if it was a matter of women's opening up what would be best for women in any kind of medium to long-term manner, that the concerns about daughters would be, perhaps, even if it isn't concerns about sons, it would be concerns about daughters that would emerge as paramount, even over the concerns of the mother. So what is it that was, I still don't exactly get why it was that you weren't being successful, because it doesn't make sense.
Because there was two things happening simultaneously. One was such a strong emphasis on freedom, and the freedom manifested in two areas. One is in the area of divorce. In divorce, the women were often saying, I don't like my husband. I want to start a new life. I want to be able to move out of state if I wish to get a job that I want. Or my new husband or boyfriend wants to move out of state, and so I want to be able to take my children or child with me. Because I know what's best for my child, which would be like the medical community saying we don't want women to be participating in the medical community because we know what's best for the patient, and not that women might have a separate contribution to make. On the other hand, there was women who wanted to have the freedom to be able to have children without being married. And so 53% of women under 30 today who have children in the United States have children without being married. And the belief was, again, that women knew what was best for the children. So they could take this on if they wanted to. And if they couldn't find a man that they really wanted, that they could raise the child by themselves or the children by themselves.
Okay, so part of it was actually driven by questioning the necessity of the nuclear family as the smallest viable unit. And part of it was...
A, that's correct, and B, the feminist community started when I would go to feminist rallies and so on. There would be many books about Lenin and the nuclear family being the patriarchal men that were oppressing women, and so I think the feminist movement grew out of two huge iterations. One was the civil rights movement, where there was an oppressor and an oppressed. Then there was the movement of not just civil rights, but after the civil rights movement came the Marxism, and the belief that there were oppressors and oppressed among Marxists. And a lot of the feminist movement, the early feminist movement, was we had groups like Red Stockings and many other groups like that were Socialist Worker Party type feminists that very much believed in Marxism, and they had the dichotomy of oppressor versus oppressed. So when it came to men, because we earned more, because our biological, not our biological, but our socialized and biological responsibility was to earn the money and do that type of nature of providing. The feminist movement looked at the fact that we earned more money once we had children, and so therefore we must be the oppressor, like the bourgeoisie of Marxism, and women must be the oppressed. So you have two things happening simultaneously: this belief that the oppressors are wanting to be equally involved with the children, and then secondly, men having no idea why they had value. Third, the very few men that did study the value of being a father and how important it was to children, didn't speak up about it, and women can't hear what men don't say. So we had this world then where women were sharing the burden of breadwinning, but no one was even interested in asking the question about whether men could share the burden from women of earning, of providing equally for the family, and women weren't even interested in that because they were so focused on their freedom and saw men as the oppressor, and so there was no space to articulate the value of fathers and men in the family.
Okay, so well, your terminology is interesting too, because you're attributing the desire of the women who were pushing against what you were saying say, you're attributing that to a desire to freedom, but it seems to me that you could easily use irresponsibility as a terminology there, because freedom without concern for the medium to long-term consequences of your actions, especially when you're bringing in, when you're dealing with minors, when you're dealing with children, that's not freedom, that's irresponsibility.
That is absolutely irresponsibility. And that is where we as a society have failed to come in and say, first of all, whenever either sex wins, that is, a woman wins custody, for example, whenever either sex wins, both sexes lose. And it's worse than that. Whenever either sex wins, both sexes lose. And in the case of family, the children lose enormously. And we also need to sort of understand exactly what is it that leads to children doing so much better when they have fathers involved. I started researching that, and I ended up, as you know, with the boy crisis, ended up with more than 70 different ways that when children have their father involved in about an equal way, that they do so much better.
Well, it would be a lovely thing if you could detail out some of that.